Okay, so today we're going to look at the income expenditure analysis. Income expenditure analysis, more broadly known in the literature as the Keynesian cross. Okay, the Keynesian cross. I'm going to explain by using a diagram. Okay, here we have income or output. So it doesn't matter whether you're using Y or GDP, it's the same thing. Here is aggregate expenditure. Why did I say they were the same thing? Remember in the lecture, we have said that what you produce, GDP, you will get paid an income. So GDP is equal to income. You produce $100 worth of goods and services, you get paid the $100. And we also say in the economy, all of that income will be spent, aggregate expenditure, which is all equal to the identity you should now be familiar with. Okay? So essentially, if you start producing more, you start earning more, and you start spending more. Okay, so keep that in mind. Can I move that? There we are. No, we can't. There we go. Okay. So keep that in mind. That identity is I guess graphed in the following red line which I've just drawn here, where aggregate expenditure equals income, right? And since income is equal to GDP, it could have been aggregate expenditure equals GDP. It doesn't really matter. Okay, this is what we term your planned expenditure line, right? This is your planned expenditure line. It's your planned expenditure. Right. What we're essentially saying over here by drawing a 45-degree line is that there is a 1-to-1 relationship between income and aggregate expenditure. Right? If income goes up $100, aggregate expenditure will go up $100. If income goes up $5, aggregate expenditure will go up by $5. That's essentially what it means, right? But then that is what we plan or what we think will happen. But we also have what we call our aggregate expenditure schedule. Aggregate expenditure schedule. This is what we actually spend, right? The difference between the red line and the blue line is the red line says this is what we think we would be spending, what we're planning to, and the blue line is what we are actually spending. Okay. Where they meet is equilibrium, right? Where they meet is equilibrium. Find another color. Where they meet is your equilibrium. And output will be Y0. Okay, and your actual expenditure will be AE0. Right, and the economy is in equilibrium. Okay, this could be your potential GDP situation. Okay, at this situation, so we want to explain disequilibrium and equilibrium from the point of view of inventories. So in order to do that, I want to introduce the inventories in our equilibrium situation, E0. Okay, so let me move that. I guess that will just go. Right? We're talking about our inventories. Okay, so when you are at Y0, and hence you are in equilibrium at the level E0, we say that your planned inventories equals your actual inventories. Okay, so for example, let's say you are producing 1,000 units of pens, 1,000 pens. Oh, okay. You're producing 1,000 pens. You plan to sell 800, and you plan to keep 200 as inventory. You just keep it in your warehouse just for emergency. Okay, that's what you plan to do. That is your planned expenditure. Your planned investment. You plan to produce 1,000, sell 800, and keep 200 as inventory. And it turns out that is exactly what happens. Customers buy 800 and you keep 200 in the warehouse. You are in equilibrium. The question is, what happens if you are not there? So that's what we're going to look at now. What happens if you're not in equilibrium? So I come back here. What happens? And I ask the question, what happens if we happen to be at point Y1? So I'm going to find another color and put that up. Y1. What happens if we are here? Y1. Now you are in this equilibrium because planned expenditure does not equal aggregate actual expenditure, right? You have a gap now. You have a gap now, right? This is your actual expenditure, how much you're actually spending, and this is what you thought would be spent. Okay, so we are in a situation of disequilibrium because planned expenditure is greater than the actual expenditure. Okay, you thought people would be spending more money than what they are actually spending. And how are we going to explain? Well, we're going to show you that this is going to cause a move, right? This is going to cause, oops, what did I just do? Oh, I have to draw that again. And we have this gap over here. Okay, so we want to show you how we move from Y1 back to Y0. Right? We want to show that there is going to be a move from Y1 to Y0, and we're going to use planned inventory and actual inventory to explain that situation. So I'll bring this back. So this was the situation at Y0. What is the situation at Y1? At Y1, we are in disequilibrium. Okay. At Y1, actual spending is less than expected. Actual spending or actual expenditure less than expected. This is going to have an effect on our inventory. Okay, we have produced 1,000 pens expecting to sell 800 and have 200 in the inventory. So you have produced 1,000 pens, but instead of selling 800, you have sold less than 800. Let's say you have ended up selling 700. Now in your inventory, you have 300. You wanted 200, but you've ended up with 300. Okay? The fact that you have more inventory than you like is known as positive unplanned inventory. Positive unplanned inventory. Okay? That basically means that you have more stock than you would have liked. Okay, then the question is, what's going to happen now? Well, what happens to the firm now? If you find that you were thinking of selling 800 and keeping 200, but you've sold 700 and keep 300, then what will happen essentially is you will cut production. You will next year produce less because people are buying less, and you might as well sell the old stock first before you start producing more. Right? So firms will cut production. This will of course lead to a fall in GDP because you're cutting less. You're producing less. Producing less is a fall in GDP, which means your income must be less. Okay? Which will reduce aggregate expenditure eventually. And this will continue until you reach Y0 and you are back in equilibrium. Oh, incredible. Okay, I move that there. And that's how we go from Y1 to Y0. That's the explanation. Okay, what happens if you instead you start at Y2? What happens if you start at this point over here? Now again you are in a disequilibrium. So I don't need to go that far up, sorry. So again we are in a disequilibrium, right? Again we have a gap. Right? There is a gap between actual expenditure and planned expenditure. Except now it's the opposite scenario. And we're going to show you how you go from Y2 to Y0. Okay, how we go from Y2 to Y0. So I will put that there. Bring this one here. We're going to compare with the original equilibrium Y0. Okay. So now we are at Y2. Y2 is a situation of disequilibrium. Okay. In this situation, you're going to find in this situation that spending is greater than expected. Spending greater than expected. More than expected. People are spending more than you think. People are buying more than you thought. Okay. So you have produced 1,000 pens, aiming to sell 800 and keep 200 in stock. What instead happens, if you have ended up selling 900 and you only have 100 in inventory. Okay. We call this situation negative unplanned inventory. Okay. So what will happen here is you go and check how many pens you have in your warehouse and you find I have less than I thought. So what will you do next year? You will increase your production. Which essentially means you are increasing your GDP. As you are producing more, your income is higher. As your income is higher, you will start spending more. And this process will continue until you reach Y0. Put that on the graph. Move all of this away. We don't need them now. Okay. So that situation will continue till you go from Y2 to Y0. Okay, so that's how we use inventory to explain a move from a situation of disequilibrium to equilibrium.